Okay. All right. We're recording. Okay. So, how was your doctor's appointment?
It went well. My blood pressure, my systolic was down 4, and my diastolic was down 13.
And that's with blood pressure meds.
That's with blood pressure meds.
Okay. Well, good.
So I talked to her, and she said it would be a gradual decline over time. She does not expect it to. She wouldn't expect it to be 120 over 80 the next week. She said you
No.
faint. She said it is a gradual decline over time.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome news.
And she said, and I talked to her, and she knows that I'm talking to you, and she said she expects that with the stress relief, after years of being so terrible to myself physically and mentally, that she expects that this should come down naturally.
Yeah.
But that will also take months.
Yeah. Yeah. The symptoms that you had before were instant, right? But the chronic effect on the body, she's correct. It's kind of like to expect that you're going to all of a sudden like lose a bunch of weight because you're not binging is also a little irrational, especially if the binging has been for a chronic period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, that's awesome. And did she feel comfortable allowing those things to wait on any medication?
No, she left me at my same prescription, but she didn't increase it.
Okay, that's good.
So the goal is to get off of it. I don't know if I told her, like you had mentioned last week, it would be very interesting to see where things are in 6 months.
Yes.
And I said eventually the goal is to just get off of it, be off of them if possible. Mm-hmm. But at least have it lower than what it is now. Mm-hmm. If that's where my baseline is going to be.
It's got to feel good. Does it feel good to know that you're taking care of this? That you're actually doing something about it?
Oh, it really does. And it's okay that I asked for help to do it. Well, with the meds and then with you.
Yeah, you know what? I know that there's been times where I've had some physical issues that I haven't tended to, and it's actually kind of stressful holding on to the idea that I should be tending to this and I'm not, and when am I going to? It's like procrastination. Like it's like knowing that there's something that needs to be tended to, but you're not doing it, and it just stays there. It's like having a to-do list that has this continuous thing to do that you're never really getting rid of. So to go is just like, I can take that off my list. It feels gratifying. It feels like, okay, I did it. No matter what the end result is, it's like I'm now moving forward rather than sitting in a state of paralysis because you're procrastinating moving forward.
Right.
In fear,
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so
everything get worse.
And then to feel even worse about it as things get worse. Mm-hmm. Totally. Oh my God, that you've got to feel so relieved from that.
I am, and especially to have these things, kind of getting things dealt with during the holidays, which is very interesting too, because I feel like it seems different this year. And I noticed this week I was hyper aware that my personality is different.
Yep. Yeah, well, go ahead. I find it interesting, though, that you use the word personality. So many people have symptoms and they say that's my personality. The symptoms are the personality. Right? So I'm wondering if that's what you're witnessing, is that something you identified as a personality was in actuality a symptom. Those were symptoms, right?
What do you mean?
Symptoms of fight or flight, like survival mode. It's not a personality trait. It's a human way of being under certain survival triggers. And so, but because you lived in it for so long, you might have attached to them as personality traits. Like, I'm all or nothing. I'm perfectionistic. I'm type A. A lot of those, or I am lazy. I am procrastinate. Those, a lot of people think those are personality traits when in actuality, they're symptoms. And so, makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, so when you say my personality is so different, well, you're probably more like your real self now, or the way you are in being, the way you are when you are just say, I am being, you're being more like who you would be without survival mode, without trauma, without all the coping mechanisms to cover up the trauma or to compensate for the trauma, right? So it should feel like it's far more relaxing. It's like you're in a space where there is more lenience. That you should feel like you have a space around you that is more giving, relaxing, less perfectionistic. You should feel like you have the grace and forgiveness to figure things out. There's no pressure. There's no impulsive nowness. No. There's none of that. Bad, good. You ruined it. The pressure should feel gone in your personality.
Yeah, I can feel that a lot. Like, when I first met my husband, like 15 years ago, I lived a couple hours away, and we'd drive back and forth to see each other. And when I would go to see him at his work, he doesn't know this, but I would drive to his work, and then I'd have like a couple wine coolers, and then I'd go up to his job because I knew I'd have to meet his coworkers.
Got it. So it kind of helped you relax.
Yes.
Yeah, took the edge off.
That,
gave you a little confidence boost, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's...
Even with that, it was still like, this isn't totally working.
Right. It's so not good. You probably knew at the time, I shouldn't be doing this. This is crazy, but I need to chill.
Right.
Yeah.
And anytime we'd have like, work function, a party at somebody's house, I would drink to the point where not passing out, but I would definitely go over.
Yeah, the goal. Well, wasn't that the goal?
Yes,
I know.
Because I wanted to, because I loved feeling free, and I could talk at that point. I could talk to strangers, and
totally.
I was friendly and chatty, and there was like not a care in the not a care in the world, and I thought, this is what I want. Like, I just want to stay here, like here where I can talk to somebody I don't know, and there's no second thoughts about distance, anything like that's what I like. That's something
I love that you just said that.
Be aware of that.
You said it was like
I want to be.
What is the word you just used?
No judgments.
So I common refer to alcohol as Jesus juice. It's like grace in liquid. And that's what that is. At least that's what when people are looking for the buzz, they're getting this sense of freedom, temporary freedom to have to be perfect, and that freedom is projected out onto others. So not only are you feeling like you're a good person in the moment, but you think everybody else is a good person in the moment. Because you're giving everybody grace. You're giving yourself, mercy and lenience and forgiveness and grace, and you give everybody else lenience and forgiveness and space, and it really just accentuates connectivity with people. Now, it's not the alcohol that does that. Your brain, have you noticed that you feel that way now without the alcohol?
I do. Mm-hmm. That's what I was going to mention too. That's where I was getting.
Yeah. You don't need the drug.
Like I have felt this week, I've been so aware that if somebody knew me, like hadn't talked to me since I first talked to you like 6 weeks ago, and then talked to me today, they might think, is she okay?
She just seems like she's so happy and she feels so joyful. She just seems like she's got a perma grin. Like life is beautiful and she sees the beauty in everything. Oh yeah, that's a state of being. And a lot of people take drugs to get there. It's not the drug that does it. All the drugs do is eliminate the blocks, which is the judgments, it eliminates all the conditioning, all the programming. It's almost like I just want to get rid of the programming for 2 seconds so that I can just be real. And so a lot of people, unfortunately, attach the drug to the realness as if the drug is creating that, but actually it's not. And you're getting that awareness right now that, what the drug did, what the alcohol did is it just gave me a moment of freedom from my shitty ass perspective. It allowed me to have this awareness. It gave me access to this awareness. So it's not the alcohol that did it. It just, your brain does it. It's capable of doing it. Right? And so what you're experiencing is what that is without the influence of the substance. So obviously there's difference. Like you're not slurring. You're not, falling over on your face. But the feel of lovingness and connectivity should feel the same.
It does.
Yeah.
And I was so aware of that this week.
Oh, isn't that the best?
It was very strange.
And you don't need anything to do it. What I found miraculous for me is that it requires nothing. It requires humility, openness. It requires you accept whatever comes in, right? As it comes in, and that you feel capable of whatever it is, even if you don't know what it is, and that you are given all this freedom to just be truthful and real and good enough in your suckiness. And when that happens, all of a sudden everybody else is good enough in their suckiness. And now that connection happens. All of a sudden you're connecting to perfect strangers on the street that you are just having compassion for because you can see maybe in their homelessness or making an assumption, but right, that someone who is, let's for example, dressed in total goth, dark, black, that maybe they don't see the truth of themselves from within. They see it only through a condition of dress.
Right.
Yeah. That this is something that was very apparent to me for a couple years after recovery, where I felt like I was totally illuminated. I could feel the trees and their existence. It was the most amazing space that I was in for a couple of years. And I can recall it, but it's hard to stay there for whatever reason now. Kids, people, whatever it is. But you realize that all people who are, let's just say, addicted to drugs, well, not all, let's just generally say, in general, they are seeking the freedom that you can exist in without the drugs. The problem is that they have these belief systems and these stories that they're telling themselves that completely block them from it. And so it takes a substance to get them, their brainwashing or their belief systems to shut up. Mm-hmm. And then the brain goes to that space naturally. It's like being a kid again. Prior to programming. Prior to trauma, and you don't even have to recall this feeling. Like, we didn't intend for this feeling when we started to work together. I didn't say this is what it's going to be like. Right?
Right.
The only focus that we had in talking, in reality, my focus was to give you a perspective to shift your awareness. That's all I did. I gave you relativity to go, oh my God, I have a perspective outside of mine to see that mine is not probably the one I want. Is this making sense?
Yes.
Okay. I never know. Sometimes I don't make sense to myself, so. No,
it does make sense.
And then this space shows up, right? And all of a sudden it comes to you naturally. It's not something that I am manipulating and creating for you as your guide. I'm not doing this. This isn't Robin's sensational freedom message. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not my technique. This is a natural state of being. What's amazing is this capacity has always been here. It has always 100% been here. It's just you had to suffer so much for you to be open to letting go of some of these destructive, poisonous, toxic belief patterns to have access to it. And now you're here and you're recognizing, oh, this is what I was doing when I was drinking alcohol, when I had some when I was relating to alcohol dysfunctionally, and with food. Go back to your binging, that period of time when you're binging, that space of time between it's on and it's complete, the freedom you get in that moment to not have guilt and shame and to feel bad, even though you're in isolation doing it. It's not the same as alcohol, which is very much a social connectivity thing, or just in your own mind giving yourself grace. For alcoholics, it is in their own mind, in their own space, in their own isolation. In your case, that was a very socially connected condition around it. Anyways, I love that you just brought that point up. I love it. That is so relevant and so true. Yes, it is.
Well, I right back at you because I was thinking earlier this week, I'm going to tell Robin that I almost feel like I'm drunk all the time, but I'm
without the alcohol.
That adequately describe it? Yes, it does. It actually does, but I didn't know any other way to word it. Mm-hmm. But I don't feel drunk. I feel the way I want the social freedom that drinking to excess would give me.
Yeah, well, drinking to excess too, I bet you helped you release yourself from your childhood, your adolescence, right? It's like it gave you a separation from that trauma story.
Yeah, and I wouldn't do it at home, but it was any type of social, like Christmas party, mostly Halloween and Christmas parties. Just go and I'm just gonna have a drink for the buzz, and then I end up just almost hammered, just like nearly hammered, and it's just like I really like this,
right? But it's the freedom that you like. It's not the being hammered part.
Yeah, and it made me like talk to strangers. It gave me the ability to talk to strangers, which I never just strike up a conversation, which I would never do previously. And it was just, and then we have a conversation with a stranger, and it's done, and I'll never see them again. And it was like, oh, okay.
And I can love them in that moment. It's not even just talking to a stranger. It's not even talking to a stranger. It's loving that stranger too. I can love this person, and I will love them while I'm drunk. It's understandable, right? It's so understandable. That was huge for me too. That awareness. That was a big deal, because that gave me a level of compassion for all addiction.
Yeah.
It really did. I was like, oh, yeah, I would do the same. It just so happened to me that what was giving me a sense of grace was losing weight, thinness, exercise control. And it was so fleeting. It never really happened. I was chasing that freedom. You could say you did the same you could look at your desire to be thinner and say, well, that's what I thought I would get when I reached thinnerness. But because I wasn't thin in the current situation, I used alcohol as a intermediary, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Most definitely. It was always about, when I lose the weight, this is how I'm going to feel.
Yeah, like you can be yourself then. You can be the truth of what's inside. You know, the truth of what's inside, though, why, do you really believe that that shouldn't have the freedom to come out unless you're thin?
Absolutely not.
Right? Doesn't that just sound horrible? It sounds terrible.
Yeah, it's like keeping yourself a prisoner.
Yeah, you can't.
Unnecessarily.
Yeah, you can't live, you can't experience your life until the body is perceived to look a way that is beneficial. Isn't that nuts?
Exactly.
Oh.
It is. It is nuts.
Well, it's nuts now. It's nuts now on this side. You see how, like, holy crap, no wonder I had mental health problems, right? No wonder. No wonder I had an eating disorder. No wonder I had worked so hard. You know, anybody would work that hard. If freedom came in that thinner package, everybody would work that hard and put themselves in very much dangerous position with food in terms of that primal urge to binge. You know, it takes significant degrees of restriction, not just in your mind. It doesn't have to be in reality. It can be, I have to restrict that much. I had one client who truly believed any eating was bad. So anytime she ate, she felt terrible. Didn't matter what it was. It was just eating 100% was off limits. She believed she should starve because that's how desperate she was to actually get to that freedom. She was like 400 pounds.
Wow.
Right? You can understand why she would believe that I have to be, you know, but she thought the same thing when she was 200 pounds. I need to be 150 pounds to be free, you know? So the desperateness, I guess you could say if you put all of your freedom into thinness, that it is going to become very pressurized. And you can imagine why someone would be so obsessed then about dieting. Because that is the means to the ends to this freedom of just being yourself and being loving to others and being willing to approach others because you feel confident in who you are and you don't feel unsafe anymore with yourself to the point where you're okay with unsafety with others because you feel like you have capacity. You have that sense of capability, right? So if you're 400 pounds and you believe that freedom exists in a physical form, and the form is thinnerness, you're gonna suffer because you're gonna have to starve. And the more desperate you are to get there, the more pressure to starve you have. And how does that manifest when you relate to food? How does that manifest in terms of your relationship with food?
Right.
Blows it up. Because you're an animal. So it's conflicting with your survival needs with food. So the brain is wired in terms of survival with food is to feel safe, abundant, that you have an adequate amount, that you can get more. And so that's our wiring. You can't change that wiring, right? Unless you prioritize thinness. So we could look at a functioning anorexic who is functionally starving themselves, and you could say they have completely diminished that relationship, that survival with food, because they've prioritized the survival of their narcissism as a higher survival need. And so they have to, but they live in isolation to do it. So they have to somewhat to create a flip around to make their narcissistic superiority survival more important. They have to live in isolation to make sure that food is repressed. They're still repressing that urge to eat, but they do it with isolation, so it's not an option. They don't go out to restaurants, they won't come out of their rooms, they won't do anything, right?
Yeah.
They just don't and then they pride themselves in that crap. anyways, so yeah, go ahead.
This week I got a new trainee at work, and our trainees spend a year in the training program, and this was the first time that I got a trainee where I did not tell myself, okay, by the time her training is done in a year, I'm going to be so many pounds. Where I didn't go, okay, she sees the fat me, but I'm going to prove to her that this is not me, that at the end of her training in a year, I'm going to be 100 pounds lighter. Like, this was the first time I've ever had any trainee, or any of a stranger that I met pretty much, where I wasn't telling myself, look, person, you see this person, but this isn't me. Like, I'm going to be different in a year.
Yeah, what you're doing is you're trying to get her approval. So you're projecting onto that person your sense of shame about it. And then, and not only that, but your sense of inferiority. And the goal would be that I'm going to prove to them I'm not inferior, that I am superior, or I can handle this. So they're seeing me in my shameful piece of shit body right now, but I want them to know the superior identity that I am holding on to. I want them to identify who I am in their mind as the exceptional version. That is how sneaky narcissism is. So sneaky. Right. It sounds like, too, you're positioning other people to be the mother figure, like your mom.
Yeah, it could be that I'm guessing what they're thinking about me when I actually have no clue.
Right. Well, you're guessing with your own thoughts, right? Yeah. You're guessing with your own feelings that other people. And you know what? To some degree, it's true, because a lot of people are programmed within supremacy in this culture. But no one really takes it as serious as they do with themselves. So how serious you were taking it with yourself, you were projecting that seriousness onto others as if they're just as serious with you. Right? So that person may say, I want to lose weight, but everybody in general gives everybody else grace from their own personal standards, because we all want to be personally superior. So they don't have to meet these standards, but I do. Either way, yeah, you're connecting with that projection of your own belief patterns, as if as if they feel just as shitty about you as you do in that moment, and vulnerable and exposed as a failure, that you want to make sure that they know you're not a failure. Because there is that internal sense that you know you're not a failure, but you're having to prove it to that thinner supremacy standard that you're projecting onto everybody around you. Right? So if they believe in thin supremacy, then I am a loser. So in order for me to not be seen as a loser, I have to prove to them with that system in mind that I'm not a loser. Because I want to feel good about myself, and I want to feel connected to this person.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And I recognized this week that I didn't. See, I met her on Monday, so I recognized I didn't have those feelings when I first met her. I was like genuinely happy to meet her and get started with our training.
Yeah, and and it doesn't matter what she thought about your weight, does it?
No.
That information's irrelevant. Irrelevant.
Right. Yeah.
You want to know why?
Totally.
Because you don't care. Even if she did care, you don't care.
Right. I don't care what she thinks about my weight.
Even if she did care, you don't care. So it's totally irrelevant to you. This is how it works. When you change your belief systems and you change how you personally feel within yourself with that, what does it matter what anybody thinks? What, right? Do you need to prove to that person you're a superior? Is that person the person that holds the keys to your sense of value? That person, So when you don't give that person that power, when you hold the power, within yourself. And you don't think that this is something worthy of shame anymore. You personally don't believe it. Do you see how that shift in your beliefs is why you don't care what anybody thinks?
Yeah.
That part people struggle with. That is a definite point of a block for a lot of clients I work with. How do you not care? That's a hard one, don't you think?
It is, and it's difficult to describe, but I'm going through it. Like, her opinion and other opinions, except for like a few people in my life, their opinion of me, I don't care what it is.
Yeah. Well, you're not willing to suffer the way doing what they want you to do so that they can give you a temporary moment of acceptance.
Right. And I'm finding that I'm being less of a busybody, say, at work. Because if there was some kind of gossip or scuttlebutt going around, I would always find out about it. And I think that people would tell me things because I would be interested in what they had to say. And now I'm finding that I just don't care. I don't want to know other people's business. It's feeling kind of gross to me to hear the gossip and the rumors about work.
Yo, totally. Well, you don't want to be a part of it.
Yeah, I don't want to know. I don't care. I don't care. No matter how salacious or interesting or how bad someone messed up, like, I'm finding that I just don't care about that.
Don't you too see that it's all relative? There's so much relativity in how one person interprets it versus another person who's interpreting it. And not only that, but why isn't there any grace? Or where is there lenience? So is it super strict? So any of that gossip you're hearing is coming from a projection of someone's strictness and expectations from what they're believing and thinking. And so you can say, of course, they're upset about it. Oh, that's true relative to that person's perception. But why are they so upset about it? I don't know if that makes any sense. Like when someone, like with the clients I work with, anytime there's given this strong opinion or a very strong victim story, I question all of it. Because they're clearly distorted in their perception, or they're not. But how do you recover? Well, you have to not give it power. My point being, that person has the freedom to have that perspective and with that level of strictness around it with other people, but that means that they're that the way that they're upset is the consequence, not the person they're judging or criticizing. That person did not make you respond that way. You did. So yeah, what you're learning is to steer far away from people like this. There are people in my own community, friends that I have that are that way, and I don't tell them anything. I'm always distant. Because I don't want to be in the damage path, right?
Right.
So I'm kind. And I'm compassionate for where they're at. But you can see that it is where they're at. It's not necessarily where the environment is at. It's where they're at. They are projecting it onto the environment. So can you see why it would be to your advantage to be like, I am not interested. I don't care. Why get involved when this could be one person's paranoia working?
That is so true.
So you start to give people like that a lot of wiggle room in terms of the seriousness you give them. I just don't take them serious. I have compassion. They may come to me and go, oh my God, I have all this going on. I'll be like, oh, that sucks. Figure it out. But I never go, oh, we got to do something. Like, I don't get involved.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Good for you. See this? Can you see how all of a sudden you have this radar around drama?
Yeah, and especially drama when somebody wants to talk about someone else who's not even in the room.
Totally. See, that becomes like, right? You have this radar. It's like this drama radar. Ding, 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 ding. That means don't get involved. This is that person's problem. And you're the next victim, so.
Oh, yes. I've always thought too, they say, if they'll talk about someone else, they'll talk about you. And I've always known that.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to be attached to it. This is like getting out of junior high. Like, I'm growing up. Maturity is increased. You're. That was what I find to be also really fascinating is when someone goes through this, their emotional maturity when they were down in that space was so juvenile, but when you recover, it's like whoosh, it skyrockets. There's just this emotional discernment from your own suffering that you have this, like I said, it's like it develops this antenna around a reception around that lower way of being, and you identify it quickly in others and around you. So you might not have had the same reception before.
Oh, for sure I did not.
Isn't that amazing? That we didn't study this, it's not practiced, it just happens.
It just did, all of it. Just the awareness, the like cloud lifting up and chipping away. There's no point where I went, okay, this is when it occurred. It just has little by little, each week has changed and evolved. And so each week is just kind of a new awareness, but I think that this is where it's going to be for a while. I feel like I wanted to feel. But it's just been the perspective change on my childhood, and then detaching myself from the guilt and shame with food and not giving it the power that it once had over me.
That's your body image. And the body image. Don't skip the body image aspect. You kind of skipped over that. Don't forget that. Because that's how you get the freedom with food, right?
Correct.
You accepted your body. You accepted the fat. You accepted that this is what happened and you forgave it. Then that ease with food occurs.
Okay. Yeah. And so it's just been little by little. It has just happened.
Have you noticed that the little things create exponentially huge shifts?
Yes.
The little change in thought isn't creating a little change in your way of being. It's like a little thought changes huge way of being. It's like big.
Yeah, and the thought comes with it's like a new awareness. And then I think about it and contemplate it and go, okay, this is what I think this is what it's supposed to be like. Okay, this is good.
Right, and it feels. You just got to stay present. Don't get ahead of it. I sense that that's what you're doing. You don't want to get ahead of this because you can't afford to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I can feel it. I can tell in the way you're staying present with it that you are totally going the way I did. Just stay present. It'll happen naturally and on its own. I'm not going to try to manage this. I'm just going to stay aware and stay humble and allow things to come in. I mean, it feels raw.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. One thing that helped me solidify it, because there is that solidifying property to it, where it feels like it becomes concrete, permanent, the permanence in this. I had to connect that I have to permanently accept the truth, whatever it is. The truth of my existence, the truth of my body, the truth of my status, the truth of my death, the truth as it arises. I have to be with it. I have to ride the crest of it. I have to let it in and not go in front of it or behind it.
Okay.
And that just takes staying present, staying aware, staying humble, allowing loss to occur at all times, removing expectations at all times, or if you have an expectation, giving it tons of lenience at all times. So you don't have any, you're trying to remove bias or need. So the key is to not need anything, right? In terms of my eating disorder, it was solidified the moment I realized I will permanently accept a fat body. It doesn't matter to me. I am now permanently accepting a body without condition. So if I get in a car accident, if I lose my hair, if I get cancer, if I'm a burn victim, I am permanently accepting what it is as it occurs. Doesn't mean that I don't take ibuprofen if I've got cramps. It doesn't mean I don't go to the doctor and get a pap smear. It doesn't mean that I don't, get my immunizations, or it doesn't mean all that. It just means that if it's out of my control or power, I accept it and I will work within it. I will no longer be afraid of it or be resentful of it, right? There's two sides, the resent and the non-acceptance, and then there's the fear and the preventative controls. I don't want either side. So I will accept as it occurs, right? I will be present in it. So to this day, I mean, for me, it's been 20. It will be 20 years this April, March, this coming, right? It will be 20 full years from my complete and total shift of consciousness. I have never returned. No, it's not as high as it's always been, but it's still within an area of wisdom, right? To where everything you're saying is still real to me. It is still relevant and real, and it is still existing in my state of being. Right?
Right.
And so I guess what I have to learn at this point, when someone gets to this space, is I don't necessarily understand how I stay here. I don't necessarily know how to tell you how to do that. Other than humility, non-attachment, just stay true to your integrity as a loving person. Stay in that space of lovingness. I don't know how, at this point you've done it. You did it. You're doing it. Whatever that is. You're open to this way of being, and therefore you have this way of being. It is occurring, right? I don't know. Go ahead.
It is difficult to explain, but I know that you understand it. But it is I couldn't imagine going back to that old shameful person.
Right.
That was so heavy.
Oh, and dark.
Really was.
Dark and limiting.
Living in a bubble. Literally living in a bubble, to where you wanted to be close to people, you wanted to connect, but you thought you were trying by, fat shaming yourself by telling them, oh, I want a diet, trying to connect that way, and, like drinking at parties,
Mm-hmm.
like being able to, it just was such a heavy way to live.
I know. And it's so much work for something that doesn't take really anything to access. Just take that humility and that grace and willingness to be alone. That willingness to fail too. I mean, that's a big one. Like you had to accept failure and willful failure.
Mm-hmm. And it was always trying to cover up and make excuses for myself to other people about how I was.
And that just put more pressure on you. More performance, more pressure.
And it was more like, aside from the everyday stressors of life, they were just adding one more thing to it that just wasn't necessary.
Yeah, and that also added more shame and failure. I failed at that. I added one more thing, told myself I'd do it, and I didn't do it, and now I look like an even bigger ass. That's the pride. That's the downside of pride. Is shame. Is that not the truth?
Mm-hmm. And so now that I have that just veil of fakeness lifted, of trying to convince everybody else that I'm not a bad person, it's like I don't even have to think about how I want other people to perceive me.
Because
you're like, there's no thought process in that anymore.
Not at all. Well, because you're not a bad person. You validated that for yourself. I'm not a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you had to really, really go in and question those beliefs and surrender them. Like I'm not a bad person, even if I'm overweight or obese. I'm not a bad person because of my childhood. I'm not a bad person because I shamed my mother. You're not bad. All of it makes sense. And you don't have to keep on holding on to it anymore. So you let it go. Let it go. Don't you agree holding on to that is much harder?
It is, because you're having to juggle your normal everyday life, and then on top of that, kind of work on convincing everyone that, and yourself, that you're not who they are interacting with. Because it gets a lot of work. Like, I didn't realize how much effort went into that.
Oh, it's so...
It was something I did for so long, with, the little white lies to the doctor, and strangers I met, little things like that, the binging, like, that was like a separate full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I quit that job, and now I just have this job, which is just being present and aware, without having the filters of when I meet someone, the 10 things that are going through my mind. There aren't extra voices in the background.
Mm-mm.
But I am aware that I am interacting differently. That I'm very aware of that. Like I said, especially this week, I'm very aware of it. And at first I thought, is there something wrong that I'm thinking, that I'm realizing that I'm interacting differently? But then I realized that even when I had all the shame and guilt in my life, I was still aware of how I was interacting with people. It's just a different type of awareness now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I knew then I was super insecure. I knew that. But now it's just, I'm not used to this yet, and it is so new. So I think that's why I think about it a lot this week, because it is something that is so different. Like I've been put on a medication. I'm like, wow, this medication is
it's a miracle.
Really changed my right. So I think that's why I've been thinking about it. Yeah. Because it is not, I freely interacting with people without the conversation in my mind before the actual conversation with somebody begins. Like having to get up, we had our Christmas luncheon at work and got up in front of the group, and I wasn't even nervous, didn't even think about it. And before it would be like, oh my gosh, please don't call my name. There'd be a whole dialogue in my head, and this time it wasn't. There wasn't one.
No, and you'd be having all this anxiety too.
Oh, completely.
I believe this is why I believe it's a syndrome. If you look up like Stockholm syndrome, battered wife syndrome, there's a ton of symptoms people have in that environment. And when they get out, the symptoms disappear. And it does. These symptoms don't respond to medication. Like someone who's in a battered wife can take medication for these symptoms and they don't go away. Antidepressants don't work for them. Because it's not a brain problem, it's a circumstantial problem. You got to get rid of the circumstance.
Certainly.
Yeah, and so when you look at how you just recovered, you can say, well, based on the recovery and how different I feel physically and how quickly this is happening with no medication, this clearly had to have been some type of circumstantial illness, not a baseline illness.
Correct.
Because a circumstance changes, and the circumstance, your environment didn't change.
No,
it was your belief systems that changed. We could say it was... Go ahead.
That is so different to how I thought it was. With the narcissistic, I thought it was me. Me. This is my baseline. How do I get out of it?
When it is me.
How do I get away from this? What am I doing wrong?
You can see the narcissism is in the belief systems. It's not you. Right?
Yeah.
That to me was very mind opening with religion. I always bring that up, but for me it was like, oh my God, it was in that religion. The shame was in that belief system. If I internalized or allowed that to be my program, I'm going to carry shame. And I'll carry all of the symptoms of shame. And I will be full of fear of shame. And I will have to fix the shame. And I'm basically an indentured servant to that system. Psychologically. And so I recognized as I forgave myself within myself, it was like without consciously rejecting the system, I just forgave myself, which essentially said I'm no longer holding myself to those standards. It kind of naturally separated me from it. Then I had this perceptual difference between the way I felt and the way it was, and I could see, holy shit, that is the system, not me. And I came out of it like a battered wife. It's like instant change. I went from terrible, dark place to a completely different state of being. It was like so unique, to me it was like huge, deep, dark hell of suicide and darkness and permanence and obliteration to complete and total enlightenment, right? I didn't have an explanation at the time. I now have 20 years of looking back.
Right, okay.
But you're just experienced that. That's what you just went through. I think one of the things that I'm trying to understand is what my part is in it. Because I didn't do anything. I really literally didn't do anything. Except for question. Except for question your story. Who would have the balls to do that?
and I don't know who would.
I think what it is I learned from my own experience that I had to, for what had to happen for me to go through that was such severe suffering that I had to be willing to let it all go. And when I let it all go, the way I did it was by telling myself the truth, the painful, horrible truth that I did not want to face. I did not want it to even exist. The truth did not exist. And so I had to shove it down. I had to like cognitive dissonance. This is like the truth of the fact that I was not relating to that religion in a positive way at all. Even though in my mind it was supposed to be the most amazing thing. That's what I was taught. That's not easy to admit to yourself when your feelings open you up to rejection, abandonment, disapproval, social shunning, right? So when I work with people, and this is why it's like hit and miss with some of the clients I work with, many people come to me in this state and they recover like this because there's so much suffering that you can't afford to not face the pain. So when I say, here's what you need to do, and it causes this pain, you're in so much suffering that you're willing to look at it for once and witness the truth in it, right?
Yes.
So when I work with people and they come to me, all I'm doing is recognizing when they're lying to themselves. They might not even know it. I can just sense their cognitive dissonance. I can sense their manipulation around the lie, the fallacy, the facade. They don't know they're even doing it. And some people do not want to let go of the facade. That facade is their life. And so they will never recover. So when I bring them and say, oh, this is what's going on, they think that I suck because I'm promoting something that causes pain in them.
The truth.
Relative to my interpretation. I could be wrong. I always go into it knowing that. But if I bring up a truth, if they're not willing to face that truth and they go into denial, what's the likelihood they're going to actually get what you just have experienced?
Very slim.
Yeah, because they're holding on to some belief that keeps them there, down in that space, because they get something out of it. You're getting something out of it, right? You're getting something out of holding on to those stories, whether it's I'm better than you, you're wrong, I'm right. They'd have to be okay being wrong, which means the other person might have been right. That's the humility component to this.
Well, it is like being like going to someone for help and then them slapping you in the face. This wasn't what I asked for. I wanted you to sympathize with me, and
that's hilarious.
It's
well,
okay, you're okay. You're just trying to take care of childhood issues.
Oh, you're such a poor, damaged person.
Right.
What would that have done if I was that way?
Nothing.
It would have actually supported. It would have been supporting the story that you were telling yourself that kept you as a victim and a martyr.
Right, which would have gotten me not what I wanted.
No.
We just would have kept with the same perspective.
I know. Yeah. So that the willingness to always tell yourself the truth, even if it hurts, because it only hurts to the ego. It only hurts to your superiority, right? It only hurts to your own self-centeredness. Ooh, even that right there, was that a truth?
That is a truth.
It stings. It's a sting bite. And that's what people don't want to face. They don't want to admit that. Because of their pride, because of their ego, because of their inflated idea of themselves. Because of what they get out of being the martyr, making others wrong, They did it to me. You're getting some out of that story. So you have to give what you get out of it You have to give it up.
Right.
And what's amazing is what you get in return is like, holy what? It's way better. Because you get to feel connected. You get to feel love for people that you've hated, that have controlled your life. When you love someone unconditionally, all of a sudden they have no power in your life. None. Especially when you
just had a bad connection there.
I said when you forgive someone or you give someone love without conditions, even if they didn't earn it, you love them unconditionally, they have no power in your life. They have no, because you're willfully loving them. They don't have to meet certain conditions, and which means that you aren't a victim of them not meeting conditions. That's that codependent victim rescuer drama triangle. You know. Anyways. All right. Well, I'm just always so surprised. I don't know why. I'm always like, it's amazing. I can't believe it happened.
It's working still.
For whatever reason, I don't know. It happened to you. It did.
I'm not questioning it, that's for sure.
Well, how can you when you just came out of something so horrific? Nightmare. Terrible. Right. It's like a nightmare. You know, it's like... Yeah. I think that's the other thing is when it gets that bad, why keep on defending something that is so horrible? Why keep on lying for something so horrific?
Exactly.
You know, that's where people get when they finally recover. I cannot lie anymore. This is terrible. Why am I promoting something that I am so tortured by out of pride? I'm promoting something out of my arrogance and my unwillingness to be embarrassed or to admit I failed.
Right.
That right there is like drinking the Kool-Aid.
Uh-huh.
That's Jamestown type of mentality, right? I'm going to kill everybody so I don't have to admit failure.
Right.
Sick. But that's what had to happen for you, and that's what had to happen for me, and that's what has to happen for people out there. You got to get so sick you're willing to tell the truth.
Yeah.
It's like the truth or suicide. They both feel the same.